How reliable is polling? This has been a source of controversy over the past 12 months, with pollsters appearing to misread the election result in Britain and also having an indifferent performance in countries such as Israel and maybe France. Here with me to discuss this important question ahead of the referendum, likely referendum on Europe in Britain in 2015 is Janan Ganesh.
I think polling is still pretty useful, and what has been impressive in Britain is the way that, having messed up pretty catastrophically last May in the general election, the biggest failure of polling since 1992, the industry has really done what scientists should do, which is make a mistake and then examine why and try and fail better next time. And
they got it wrong because nobody expected David Cameron to win a majority. By the way, I don't think the Prime Minister did either.
Sadly, I don't think anyone in Fleet Street did. I would have loved the credibility of having foreseen that result. Nobody foresaw that result. They thought it would be a hung parliament. It ended up being a Tory majority. And the British Polling Council, the industry body, have today published their inquest or post-mortem into why they failed so badly. And there are lots of answers, but the one that I found most pertinent is that polls by their nature oversample people who are politically engaged. Just by wanting to respond to a survey, you're almost signalling that you're more enthused about politics, have stronger views than the average person. And the people who are undersampled, who are the apathetic and the indifferent, tended to lean Tory. I mean, there's a clue in the word conservative. They're not particularly assertive about their views. And so they oversampled people who are likely to vote Labour, undersampled apathetic people who are likely to vote Conservative, and that's why they messed up.
And the poor old apathetic people, none of them are potential Labour voters? Or are you actually saying the activists, the ones who want to be noticed, they're all Labour leaning, is that right?
Well, there's one interesting stat which came out last week by Professor John Curtis, the guy who did the exit poll on the evening.
Who got it right.
Who called it unbelievably accurately. And he said that post-election, when he was doing his research, the voters who were easiest to contact favoured Labour by 6 points. So these are people who responded to the first call, basically. Whereas voters who took between 3 and 6 calls or visits to respond favoured the Conservatives by 11 points. So you can see that voters who are remote, disengaged, unwilling to respond to opinion polls preferred the status quo party by really a huge margin. And that was missed by the original polling pre-election, which didn't discriminate for that factor.
And that's a big insight. Of course, this will be extremely important ahead of the Brexit referendum, likely to be perhaps in the summer.
Yeah. We've discussed this before on this video, and I've always been very confident that Brexit is unlikely to happen. This country will vote to stay in. There is one caveat. I don't want to alarm our viewers, but
you're shifting.
Well,
I can tell.
I'm only hedging, so right. I don't embarrass myself when the result comes through. But the only way this country votes to leave, I think, is if apathy is so strong, voters are so indifferent, that the only people who turn out on the day, or who turn out disproportionately, are older, more Eurosceptic voters, and we end up leaving simply because people who were inclined to vote in didn't care enough.
So what does David Cameron do in the run-up to the actual vote to stir up the populace?
Well, I suppose
to reach the great apathetic masses?
The only thing he could have done was legislate a referendum in which turnout is compulsory. That was never going to happen. It's not part of our political culture. I don't think there's much he can do. I've never bought this idea that the level of public enthusiasm rests on how much zeal and rhetoric the leaders deploy. If the public care, they care. So the one worry I would have if I was the campaign to stay in is that people don't care enough to
vote. What about you use the fear factor, don't you? Is that the way to get people out?
Yeah, I've always thought that what I call Project Fear Mark II, the fear campaign worked to keep the Union together in 2014, and I think the fear campaign will work to keep us in the European Union. If you can make people think that Brexit affects their interest rate, their jobs, their livelihoods, they're more inclined to turn out. But don't underestimate the absolutely ideological commitment of the exit voters to turn out. And the irony is these are the only people in the country who had the chance to vote in 1975.
Janan Ganesh, thank you so much.
Thank you.